he had this bad habit of making up stories about God, and they picked it up and started doing the same to him, which we don't like, of course. We like parables by Jesus. We don't like parables about Jesus. That's tomorrow. So today, what's the message of Jesus, and what's peculiarly appropriate between the message and the medium? So the message. Let me get a couple of words out that are very important. The first word, Greek word, eschaton. E-S-C-H-A-T-O-N, adjective, eschatological. If you've had the bad luck of ever running into scholars, you've probably met that word. You can drop it at a cocktail party and see how far it gets you. But it's a crucial word to understand what's going on. So let me unpack it a bit. Eschaton is an ordinary Greek word. It just means the end. If there's a line for lunch after this and there's a long line and you go around looking, if you're speaking Greek, you'd be looking for the eschaton. And it's got nothing to do with theology. You're looking for the end of the line. So eschaton means the end. Now, everything then depends on end of what? So, what did it mean in the first century, eschaton? The Jewish people had been through, well, their faith was, God is just. God is a God of distributive justice and restorative righteousness. That was their faith. And besides, God was in control of the universe. That was also their faith. But their experience was that the world is very unjust, and that they seem to be getting far more than their fair share of its injustice. One dreary empire after another, the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Medians and the Persians and the Macedonians and the Romans. When's it going to end? So eschaton is about, when's it going to end? We've been on the kicking end of this. Our faith says God is just. Our experience says the world is unjust. When are you going to do something about it? Up there? So eschaton is not, let me begin with a negative. It is not about the end of the world. Don't let anyone ever tell you that, because nobody in the ancient world, Jew or Christian, or pagan for that matter, could imagine the end of the world as everyone in this room can, because we now know how to do it. In fact, we can do it atomically and biologically and chemically and demographically and ecologically. And we're only up to E. We've hardly got going. So of course we can imagine the end of the world. The ancient world, God had created the world and stamped every bit of it good, 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 very good. It would be embarrassing for God to end the world. It would be an admission that the whole thing was some kind of a mistake, like recalling the car to the factory, as it were. Eschaton is about the end of evil and violence and war and oppression and injustice and everything else you can think of that's bad upon this transfigured earth. That is their dream. I don't want to say that's their hope. That's their faith. Because how can you hold on to a just God and an unjust world without giving up on one of them? So their faith demanded, God will overcome someday. That's called eschatological faith. Now, they're very clear, by the way, of what the world is going to look afterwards. They're not at all clear of how it's going to happen. You'd imagine probably a blinding flash of divine lightning, as it were. The world will be peaceful, the world will be no war. All of that is quite clear. Swords beaten into plowshares, spears into pruning hooks, everyone under their own vine and their own fig tree, not somebody else's, and no fear. All of that is clear. How is not ever mentioned? So, a second word we have to introduce. Apocalypsis. Apocalyptic in English. Apocalypsis is an ordinary Greek word again. It means a revelation. So, an apocalyptic eschatologist Sounds like a serious rash, doesn't it? An apocalyptic eschatologist is somebody in the first century, for example, that announces, I have a great revelation from God. About what? About the eschaton. Now, my translation for the term eschaton, which you can now wipe out and replace by the great divine cleanup of the earth. Please put all of that in capitals. The great divine cleanup of the world. That's what we're talking about. In the first century, under the Roman Empire, the most efficient and I suspect the longest enduring empire in the whole history of the time, you're underneath that. And you're listening to an apocalyptic eschatologist. What type of revelation do you want? Supposing the apocalyptic eschatologist says, oh, about 1,000 years from now, the kingdom of God is going to be established on earth. He would be an ex-apocalyptic eschatologist immediately. The audience would just, phew. What everyone wants to hear is how soon. In our lifetime. If it's not in our lifetime, get lost. In our lifetime. And tell us why. Persuade us that it's going to happen soon. It's like we might want today, please persuade us the recession won't get worse and it'll be soon over. They want the same thing. Tell us how soon. So an apocalyptic eschatologist in the first century is somebody who has a message from God about the imminence, the any day nowness of the great divine cleanup. Okay? Let me turn to Jesus. Jewish eschatology, which is the matrix for Jesus, emphasized very much the imminence. Any day now it's going to happen. It has to happen. It's getting worse. What Jesus does is what is called a paradigm shift. Do you know that word? When any tradition has been going on, it could be in science, it could be in literature, it could be in politics, could be in anything, could be in a foreign policy, a domestic tradition. When it's been going on traditionally the way it's always been and everyone grows up, this is the way it is. And then something happens and it shifts. There's a swerve in the tradition. And usually when there's a swerve in the tradition, it's kind of a scary thing because you don't know where it's going. The old thing looked pretty much the same. So everyone pretty much is saying, including John the Baptist, any day now it's happening. And Jesus comes up with this extraordinary claim. And please hear how absolutely almost weird, that's a polite word for stupid it sounds. Jesus says, it's not coming soon, it's here already. Huh? Imagine yourself in the audience hearing that. Imagine somebody from the back of the audience, Jesus, excuse me, got a question here. Did you say here or did you say near? Works in Aramaic too. No. And Jesus says, I'm saying it is here already. But Jesus, how can you say that? I understand you can always keep saying it's coming near, and unless you're unwise enough to give a date, as we know, soon extends for at least 2,000 years. Soon's a very elastic word. Politics and religion. So, Jesus, I love your stuff. Your parables are great. Haven't a clue what they mean, but they're great. How can you say the kingdom of God is here? Look around you. Nothing has changed. What's-his-face is still on his throne in Rome, and Antipas is still in his palace, and nothing has changed. And you're claiming it has arrived? Huh? Now, the only thing Jesus could possibly say, and in fact he does say, don't you see what has been happening? You people have been waiting for God to do it by divine intervention. And God has been waiting for you people to do it with God by collaboration. You've been waiting for God to do it for you, and God has been waiting for you to do it with God. No wonder nothing is happening. Still true after 2,000 years and 2 million Christians. We're waiting for God to do it. So my term for what Jesus is announcing is a collaborative eschatology, a participatory eschaton. He's not telling people, wait, be ready. He's telling people it will not happen. Nothing will happen unless you collaborate with God. And this is very serious, because you're not claiming, well, let's keep mentioning God, but really we could do it. The message from Jesus is you will not be able to do it without God, and God will not do it without you. Let me summarize that from 2 African bishops, one from North Africa and one from South Africa, about 1.5 millennium between them, who say exactly the same thing, and they summarize Christianity as succinctly as Jesus did. Augustine, Bishop of Hippo Regius in modern Algeria. God made you without you. God will not justify you without you. God made you without you. God will not justify you without you. And then in 1991, Desmond Tutu, Archbishop of Cape Town, cited Augustine and actually vastly improved him. Cited him wrong, but did it better. He said, God without you will not, as you without God cannot. God without you will not, as you without God cannot. That is the heart of Christianity. Now, supposing, let's imagine, that is the message of Jesus. It's a collaborative eschaton. It's a participatory kingdom. Nothing is going to happen without collaboration. What would be the appropriate medium for that? Why are parables appropriate for that type of a message? First of all, ignore what Mark 4, chapter 4 says. Mark chapter 4 confuses riddle and parable. They are both interactive modes of speech. You can't really tell yourself a good parable. And it's really difficult to give yourself a good riddle. Try it. But they're not the same. They are interactive. They presume an audience. But they're not the same. So let's leave Mark chapter 4 aside. What's a parable? First of all, don't think of Jesus saying the parables as we have them in the New Testament, which would take maybe, say, 5 minutes maximum to tell the Good Samaritan parable. Maximum. And if a kid coughed in the crowd and missed the word Samaritan, blows the whole thing. Give Jesus an hour with an oral audience who are not going to be polite like you people are and not interrupt. An oral audience is going to talk back and talk against one another. So an hour, maybe miming it out. And very interactive and very disruptive. And that is the function of a parable. It's to lure you into thinking. It's to provoke you into thinking. Imagine Simeon, let's say, goes home to Rebecca, and he says, heard a very wise man this morning. He was talking about sowing. He said we have to watch for the birds, and watch for the path, and watch for the thistles, and watch for the rocks. Wow, learned a lot this morning. Simeon bar nitwit. We knew all that. You've just wasted another morning, says Rebecca. Well, but that's what he said. It's a parable, dummy. Huh? It's not about sowing. Well, what is it about, Rebecca? I don't know what it's about, but it's not about sowing. Why didn't he just say what he wanted to say? Because he wants you to do what you never do, Simeon. Think. It's not about sowing, so what's it about? So the lure of a parable, the provocation of a parable, the annoyance of a parable is that you might go home saying, I don't know what that meant, but I don't like it.